Hey guys, Suffers here. Today I'll be doing a guide on Aventurine, the zesty Gamba King from the IPC's Strategic Investment Department. He is a 5-star imaginary preservation character, making him our second preservation limited 5-star unit. In this guide I will be explaining his kit, providing some Lightcone and Relic options, team builds and whether he's worth pulling over our other limited 5-star sustains. Enough yapping from me and now on to the guide. Aventurine is a sustain that focuses around team-wide shielding and follow-up attacks. I'll briefly go over some of the easier to understand parts of his kit before deep diving into the more important parts. His basic attack is a standard basic attack but scales off his defense, so it can deal some decent damage for a basic attack. His skill applies a shield based on his defense, lasting 3 turns, and it can be stacked up to 200% of the base shield value. This shield is how he'll sustain the team, and note that reapplying the shield via his kit will stack, increasing the damage the shield can withstand. Now onto the real meat and potatoes of his kit. Aventurine's talent will provide up to 50% effect resistance to allies with his shield, providing much needed protection from devastating crowd control effects or dots, while also giving him complete immunity to crowd control while shielded every other turn. The real core of his talent lies in the stacks of blind bet. He gains 1 stack whenever an ally with his shield is attacked, while he gains 2 when he himself is attacked instead. Blind bet can stack up to 10 times, but 7 is the magic, or should I say, lucky number for Aventurine. Because it's 7 stacks of blind bet, he launches a follow-up attack that deals imaginary damage to random enemies that hits 7 times, scaling off his defense. With his trace bingo, he can also accumulate stacks from follow-up attacks, while also stacking his shield, with a bonus shield given to the ally with the weakest shield value. This talent basically makes him very SP positive as a sustain, while also contributing to team damage with his follow-up attack, and has additional sustain capabilities as he is able to quickly deplete enemy toughness and in turn imprison them. If blind bet hits higher than 7 stacks, the additional stacks will be carried over for the next talent activation, so don't be afraid of overcapping. He is able to generate blind bet stacks reliably in most teams, but in follow-up teams he pops off, as frequent follow-up attackers can also contribute to generating stacks, leading to frequent follow-up attacks while constantly reapplying and stacking his shield. Now on to his ultimate. He will randomly gain 1 to 7 stacks of blind bet while applying a debuff on a single enemy and dealing defense scaling imaginary damage. This debuff will make the enemy take more crit damage from attacks, which can increase the damage of the team's DPS. And it being a debuff will also help our doctor ratio. Lastly, his technique makes him play slots, randomly increasing the team's defense of a random value for 3 turns. With an average chance to increase by 24%, a high chance to increase by 36% and a low chance to increase by a whopping 60%. The highest increase will be retained if you re-roll his technique. Don't worry about not hitting the low chances, you can always reset in MOC in pure fiction. Continuing on with his other traces. Hot Hand will automatically apply Aventurine's shield from his skill to the party upon entering battle, making him even more SP positive as a sustain, and Leverage converts his defense to crit rate by 2% for every 100 points that exceed 1600, up to a max of 48%. In order to max out the crit rate increase, you'll need to reach 4000 defense. This trace will allow his follow-up attack to deal serious damage, and you might consider having some crit damage substats in his relics. I'll now briefly go over his Eidolons. His E1 provides 20% crit damage to all allies with his shield, and his ultimate will also apply his shield after use. This one improves his support and sustaining capabilities, a very worthwhile Eidolon should you aim for vertical investment. E2 gives his basic attack more utility, applying a debuff that reduces the all-type resistance of the enemy hit by 12% for 3 turns. This is also a very valuable Eidolon as he will be spamming his basic attack most of the time, and if doing so, he can improve the team's damage, especially with a rare debuff and all-type resistance down. E4 gives him a 40% defense buff after launching his follow-up attack while adding 3 more hits to said follow-up attack. This Eidolon is alright, more defense means high shield values and more hits can lead to more damage and toughness breaks, but, in my opinion, it's very unnecessary as his shields are already strong at E0 and his follow-up attack won't be demolishing bosses and elites even with 10 hits. The only noticeable improvement is that his follow-up attack can deplete more enemy toughness against 1 to 2 targets. Finally, E6 makes him a sustained DPS hybrid, increasing his damage by 50% for every ally with his shield, increasing up to 150%. This is where a DPS build of Aventurine starts being optimal and no longer a meme build. So if you really love Aventurine, want to make him a DPS, and you have the means to do so, go for it. All or nothing, after all. Moving on to Lightcone options. His signature, Inherently Unjust Destiny, provides a massive 40% defense increase as well as 40% crit damage buff whenever he applies a shield. It also provides him an additional debuff whenever he launches his follow-up attack, applying a 10% damage vulnerability to the enemy's hit. A very solid signature Lightcone providing a ton of defense for leverage and shields, crit damage to improve his damage potential as well as a debuff to help out Dr. Ratio and other DPS. For those lucky or unlucky enough to get Moment of Victory, it is an incredible substitute. As it is a good stat stick and basically provides 48% defense increase, and with his naturally high aggro plus the increased aggro it provides, it will have a high uptime. Texture of Memories is not as good as the other two options. Effect resistance is nice to shield him from repeated crowd control effects and dots, but since he is always constantly applying shields he would not be able to make use of the second effect. The damage reduction could be useful in harder content but very unnecessary since Aventurine can keep stacking and reapplying his shield. For 4-star options, Day 1 of My New Life provides defense and the very rare all-type resistance which helps shore up his defensive utility outside of just defense, reducing diminishing returns. Landau's Choice increases his aggro for faster blind bet stacking, and with the damage reduction alongside his shield, will improve his matchup against enemies with single target nukes. He is also the best in slot holder for Trend of the Universal Market in Acheron Teams thanks to his kit, but do note it doesn't provide any defense multipliers and has a lower defense stat, requiring you to run relics with more defense stats. Concert for 2 helps facilitate a DPS build by increasing his damage for every ally with a shield, plus it is available in his Lightcone banner. And for a free-to-play option, Destiny's Threads Forewoven is a solid replacement for Concert. Moving on to Relics. Now, remember these two things when gearing Aventurine: 4000 defense, and building him as a sustain also builds him for damage. For a general sustain build, a 4-piece knight set will boost his defense and buff his shields. If you are struggling with speed substats, you can opt for a 2-piece knight 2-piece hackerspace combo. Guard of Wuthering Snow is also a solid 2-piece if you have better substats for it. For the planar set, Broken Keel is pretty much free thanks to the effect resistance he provides to the team. You may also consider Penacony in a team with imaginary DPS. In terms of stats, for the chest piece crit damage is ideal, but defense percent is also great to hit the 4000 defense requirement. Speed boots to hit the 134 speed threshold or defense percent to reach 4000 defense. For planers, either go for an imaginary damage sphere to improve his damage or defense percent to boost his sustain capabilities. For the rope, defense percent is preferred as he is able to achieve a 3-turn ultimate as long as he gets hit at least twice. But energy regeneration is still useful to help achieve faster ultimates in certain cases. For substats, aim for defense percent, speed, effect resistance to help protect him from repeated CC effects, and some crit damage to help buff up his damage a little. For a DPS build, 4-piece Pioneer set is the best since he'll most likely be used in Topaz and Dr. Ratio team, and all 3 of them will be able to supply 3 debuffs very easily to have a high uptime on the 4-piece set bonus. A 4-piece Wastelander set is also a good option since his follow-up attack is able to break enemy toughness very quickly, and he is thus able to make use of the 4-piece set bonus. You may also consider a 2-piece Duke with either a 2-piece Pioneer or 2-piece Wastelander. Again, Hackerspace is a very respectable 2-piece option if you need speed. Salsato is the most obvious choice for his planar set here, although Sigonia is perfect for pure fiction. For stats, most of the main stats are relatively the same, and you should prioritize the 4000 defense before moving on to crit damage, some crit rate and speed. And now we'll be moving on to the team building section. As Aventurine's kit is quite generic and universal for most players, he is able to be slotted into any team, but benefits from follow-up attackers as they help stack up blind bet. But I'll go over some of his more useful team options. His best in-slot team will be the IPC follow-up team, consisting of a duo DPS core of Topaz and Dr. Ratio. These two alone are able to do a ridiculous number of follow-up attacks to give him free blind bet stacks, which in turn allow him to launch his own follow-up to provide shields as well as advance numb in the turn order for more follow-ups, which then feed back into his talent, rinse and repeat. Not to mention, his ultimate applies a damage vulnerability debuff for ratio to reach his 3 debuff requirement for the 100% follow-up chance while increasing his damage. They all synergize extremely well with each other, basically feeding off each other's mechanics. The last slot can be any support of your choosing, but since this team relies on a duo DPS core, Wan Mei is the most obvious choice here. But Pella, Tingyun or Sparkle all work nicely. You'll just have to adjust Topaz into mainly providing debuffs instead of providing debuffs and contributing solid personal damage. Although I heard a little bird coming in 2.2 might be their new best in slot support, so do keep a lookout. Another team many should look out for is in an Acheron Team. Having a built-in debuff via his ultimate and being preservation means he is also able to equip the trend Lightcone, easily making Aventurine her best in slot sustain. He also provides some additional damage increase to Acheron thanks to the crit damage vulnerability he applies with his ultimate. His signature Lightcone also applies a damage vulnerability debuff whenever he performs a follow-up attack. He is also Yanqing's best in slot sustain. Being able to have 100% shield uptime to allow Yanqing to keep his Soul Steel sync buff at the same time, Yanqing also has a follow-up attack built into his kit to help build up blind bet stacks. Our General Jing Yuan also appreciates our Fruity Gambler, as he is granted a ton of effect resistance to reduce him getting crowd controlled multiple times in a row. In pure fiction, he performs really well as a breaker and damage dealer with Herta and Himiko, as the latter two can chain their follow-ups back to back, which can quickly build up blind bet to fire off more damage instances, which can break toughness really fast for Himiko and even help trigger Herta's follow-ups. He is also able to be slotted into a mono imaginary team of Ratio, Welt and Yukong. Or swap out Welt for Silver Wolf to help brute force content. For players on a budget or are free to play, he is able to be slotted into any team, so just pick your DPS of choice and 2 supports and you're good to go. So now the big question, is he worth pulling over our other limited 5-star sustain? If you already have 2 of them, don't bother unless you absolutely love the zesty man. If you only have 1 limited 5-star sustain, he is very much worth picking up. But another consideration is whether you have a decent number of follow-up attacking units that you use frequently. If the answer is yes, do consider picking him up. He is best in slot for Ratio Topaz teams and for the 2 Yanqing mains out there. Now, should you pull for his signature Lightcone? I personally would not recommend it, unless you lack good alternatives or want to increase his utility and personal damage. Because I am sure many of you have options like Day 1 or Landau's Choice, or even unlucky enough to have gotten Moment of Victory. Even for newer or free-to-play players, you have a solid option in Destiny's Threads from the Forgotten Hall shop, and it's completely free. Since his Lightcone is not that high of a priority, what about his E1? If you were to pull for more, I personally would go for his E1 as it improves his sustain capabilities, gaining shields from his ultimate while also shaving off some crit damage substats from Relics. But again, the odds of pulling for Eidolons aren't as good compared to pulling for a Lightcone, so do weigh out your options. But remember, he is pretty much a complete character at E0S0. Anyways, that's enough yapping from me. If you have any questions, do drop them in the comments. I love to help out in any way I can. Do give the video a like and subscribe for more HSR content. Now enjoy the Aventurine showcase.
鳴り響く運試しと行こう運試しと行こうようこそ凡人のステージへ根は巡るゆっくり行きましょうはっ命の花びらいずれ風に吹き落とされる僕が出そう答えてみろ気をつけてサイは投げられた全てを失うか はたまた手に入れるか。
楽しいですか。
買いだ。
もう限界か。テスト0点。存在と感知される。知識は尺と真理を探り語尾を根絶する。
当たりだ。
マイナスだ。
気をつけて。
0点。
カーブ焦らないの。行ってカ
ブ。答えてみろ。マイナスだ。
根は巡る。
買いだ。
楽しいですか。命の針ずれ風に吹き落とされる。
サイは投げられた。全てを失うか。はたまた手に入れるか。気をつけて。
調査を始めるね。生産しましょう。
買いだ。
テスト0点。
生命は呼吸するだけではない。はっ、
遊んであげるよ。
カーブ焦らないの。市場がさ、長期間見据えるのが成功の秘訣。
答えてみろ。マイナスだ。
気をつけて。
存在と感知される。知識は尺と真理を探り語尾を根絶する。
なだれに飲まれろ。
研究の価値あり。
マイナスだ。
命の針いずれ風に吹き落とされる。調査を始めるね。行ってカブ。
サイは投げられた。全てを失うか。はたまた手に入れるか。
もう限界か。テスト0点。
生命は呼吸本質は同じ。生産しましょう。
買いだ。
約束された世界。
運試しと行こう。運試しと行こう。
逆位置不利。
ほとばしい過去の伝線。
まだ優勢ではありません。まだ立ち上がりますか。何が知りたいの。協調よ。
ベッド好きに使ってくれ。
全ては記憶は皆そこで深淵を迎える。
涙キュッ来る
全てを失うか、はたまた手に入れるか、買いだ。
定められた敵データ集捕獲マーク起動。愉快な反撃の時間です。
当たりだ。
出発の時間、言動を渡そう。
敵ターゲットをまだ立ち上がりますか。最悪の力。
遊んであげるよ。
ヤッホー、剣よ、我が命じる。
おや、運命の選択だ。協調よ。
僕が出そう。
敵データ集捕獲マーク起動。愉快な反撃の時間です。記憶、皆そこで深淵を迎える。
すべて
仲間はなしだ。買いだ。
涙剣、来る気が
愛は投げられ、全てを失うか、はたまた手に入れるか、気をつ
支援開始いたします。最悪の時間。
けて。当たりだ。
敵ターゲットまだ立ち上がりますか。
涙来る気が
答えられなかった。はい、トパーズです。呼ばせよ。ニーハオ。うん。ああ、I see。はい、わかりました。